Isang magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Ito po ang tinatawag natin na Rita Gadis Hour, which is actually your hour. At sa panahon natin ngayon, maraming mga iba't ibang mga nangyayari, lalong-lalo na sa ating bansa. At lahat ito ay ating kailangan alamin kung bakit nga nagkakaganito ang nangyayaring mga paikot-ikot sa atin na nakakasama sa karamihan ng mga tao at lalong-lalo na sa ating tinatawag na peace and order. Mahalaga po ito sapagkat sa panahon ngayon na meron tayong pandemic, itong COVID-19 na virus na buong mundo ay sinasakop na, nakikita natin ang ating pamahalaan talagang nakatutok sa lahat ng mga bagay-bagay na kailangan gawin upang masugpo yung tinatawag na contamination. Wala pa itong gamot sapagkat ilang beses na nga rin natin na ikwento, ang virus ay walang gamot. Ngunit merong vaccine kung saan ay magbibigay ng konting-konti, parang halos microscopic, isang droplet sa ating sistema para magkaroon tayo ng immunity doon sa virus na yan. Para kung sakaling dumapo man sa atin, meron na tayong panlaban. Yun ang kabuluhan ng tinatawag na vaccine. Marami na rin bansa na gumagawa nito at ang unang-unang nagbigkas na tutulungan tayo dito ang Russian Federation, ang People's Republic of China. Ganon din yung mga ibang bansa na sinasabi nga ng World Health Organization, pagka sila ay makahanap na ng tinatawag na mabisa na vaccine, ito ay maaari nang gawin pagkatapos ng mga ilang test, ito ay pwede nang isagawa sa mga iba't ibang bansa. Ngunit habang wala pa yan, ang kinakailangan nga natin gawin ay mag-ingat. At ulit-ulit, yan ang sinasabi. Magsuot ng mask, mag-observe ng social distancing, maghugas ng kamay, at ngayon may karagdagan pang magsuot tayo ng face shield. Ito ay upang hindi natin bahagip kung ano man ang lumulutang dyan, ang mga nanggaling sa pag-ubo o sa paghatching ng ibang tao na maaaring meron silang dala nitong COVID-19 na ito. Hindi natin masasabi na lahat meron ito, ngunit yun ang sinasabi. You have to assume that as soon as you're out of your household and out there in the wide open world, you should assume that anybody that you encounter may be carrying a portion or some of these symptomatic signs of this COVID-19. But let us leave the care of the pandemic insofar as our country is concerned with our health workers, with the doctors, with the specialists, with those involved in the science of this, and all of those in government. Kaya meron nga tinatawag na Interagency Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases. At sa kasalukuyan, nagsasama-sama na rin ang pinag-uusapan tungkol nga sa bagay-bagay na pwede natin matigil itong pandemic na ito na makakahawa sa lahat ng tao. Nagkaroon ng posibilidad na sa darating na bukas, September 1 hanggang September 30, itong katapusan ng buwan ng Setyembre, ay ipapatuloy na yung dito sa National Capital Region at sa 4 na probinsya under general quarantine. Kaya mahalaga ito na pakinggan natin na magsasalita ang ating Pangulo at yun ang kanyang sasabihin sapagkat napagsama-sama na lahat ng mga findings, hindi lang yung Interagency Task Force, ngunit ang mga doktor din, ang mga dalubhasa, at lahat ng mga ibang mga nasa business, nasa tinatawag nga natin economic recovery, naisip nila na mababalanse natin ang ating kalusugan dito sa kinakailangan nating kabuhayan. Sapagkat sabi nga 16.4% na ang bagsak ng ating ekonomiya at kailangan hindi lamang umandar ito, ngunit kailangan ay lumaganap na para hindi lang sa paghahanap ng trabaho ng mga tao, ngunit kinakailangan din na malaman natin kung paano tayo makakatagal nitong tinatawag na quarantine na ito habang hirap pa rin ang ating mga pinapasukan ng mga opisina sa mga trabaho. Ngunit ngayon sinasabi nga na depende na sa mga establishments at sa mga business offices at kung ano man yung pinagtatrabuhan mga factory. Depende na sa mga may-ari niyan at mga nagpapatagpo niyan kung anong klaseng mga health protocols ang kanilang isasagawa. Lahat yan ay para makatulong na ang mga tao ay makapasok na sa trabaho at magkaroon pa ng additional work para sa mga taong naghahanap pa rin ng employment. Bago nagkaroon ng pandemic, alam naman natin na talagang hirap na ang mga tao maghanap ng trabaho. Nung nagsara ang mga opisina at mga ibang mga establishments, lalo lang nawalan ng trabaho ang napaparami. Ngunit ngayon, unti-unti na itong binubuksan upang malaman nga kung ito ay makakatulong sa pang-araw-araw na pangangailangan ng mga tao ngayon na naghahanap talaga ng tinatawag nga work, employment, jobs. So lahat ng yan ay ahin na natin sa mga gumagawa na itong tinatawag na Economic Recovery Program. Ngunit ang isang bagay na kailangan natin tutukan, na marahil ay hindi pa natin talagang nalalaman kung kabigat itong mga pangyayari ito, ay ang mga kaganapan na kung kailan lang nangyari ito sa Mindanao. Ilang beses na ito nagkaroon tayo at nabahala tayo sa mga pagsabog na isinagawa sa Sulu, sa island of sa Hulo. At yan ay yung tinatawag nga mga bomba, mga suicide bombings, at yung isang linggo, yun nga ang nangyari, ilang sundalo ang namatay at mga sibilyan sapagkat nagpasabog na naman doon sa isang lugar na malapit sa palengke, at yung mga sundalo ay nakaparada yung kanilang truck upang mamili ng kanilang pagkain, at yun nga ang nangyari. Suicide bombers ang kanilang hinahabol ngayon, at kanila nang natukoy at sinabi na rin itong mga taong responsable dyan na sila ang nagpasabog na yon. Sino itong mga taong ito? Ang dami kasing pangalan na lumalabas tungkol sa mga bombing, sa mga karahasan na nangyayari sa Mindanao. Yung Abu Sayyaf, yung mga Bangsamoro, anong tawag nito? Bangsamoro freedom fighters. Meron din yung ISIS na kanilang minana na nanggaling pa sa Middle East. Yung Islamic tinatawag na mga militante, dahil nga sa nangyari sa Middle East, ay naghanap sila kung saan pa pwedeng magkaroon at maghasik ng lagim at kamatayan sa mga tao na hindi naman natin maintindihan kung bakit kinakailangan na gano'n ang kanilang gagawin. Kaya tingnan natin kung ano ang punot dulo nito, kung ating maiintindihan ba. At makikita natin kung meron tayong kasaysayan tungkol dito. Tingnan natin sa simulat sa pool, yung sinasabi nga, we had errors of history in the past. Sapagkat nung unang panahon, nung pumasok dito ang Islam, lahat ng buong Pilipinas, hindi naman sa kasuluk-sulukan ng Pilipinas, but we were actually under the Islamic faith. This was before the Spanish came and they colonized our country into Christianity. So you had some of the sultanates that emerged and developed in several capitals and centers in our country, all the way up to Lingayen. For instance, we had the story of Princess Urduja. Dito naman sa Maynila, andyan si Raja Sulaiman, one of the biggest kingdoms that we had here in Manila along the Pasig River. And then we had other cities in Cebu and in Bohol and several other areas. And then in Mindanao, sila Lacandula, sila Sikatuna, at yung mga iba't iba pa. At ito lumaganap na yung relihiyon ng Islam. Kaya nabuo na rin yung mga tinatawag na mga iba't ibang mga sultanate, iba't ibang mga villages na tinatawag nga na pag-aari ng mga taong ito na ang kanilang relihiyon ay Islam. Ngunit sa tagal ng panahon, nung pagdating na nga ng mga Kastila, maybe this is already part of the history which you already know. But what has happened there is, when they say errors of history, it is because in Mindanao, where they finally settled, there were now several areas which were actually predominantly Muslim in religion, and those that were also held by the Christians, those that were coming in from Visayas and from Luzon. So there was a conflict in the sense that there was no, parang a matter of semantics. As far as Islam is concerned, wherever they're located, that is the land of Islam. as far as the Christians that migrated to Mindanao are concerned, their land will have to be titled. Meron titulo yung mga lupa na yan. May sukat yung mga lugar na kanilang tinitirikan ng kanilang bahay. So that was where the conflict began. The Torrens title, which was part of what we inherited from the Americans, it was a title to the land, meaning you own it. But as far as the Islam religion is concerned, wherever they are, that is their land. They do not place demarcation lines. They know that it is the land of Islam because they practice the religion in the territory where they live. So because of that conflict, yung sinasabi nga natin, nagkaroon ng parang hindi pagkakaintindihan. Anyway, it's a long story. But what happened was, there were certain elements where they believed that because other countries were able to remove themselves from the body politic, they could do it also in Mindanao. So that was what happened in the early 1960s. People that were exposed to the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Palestine or in Israel, they also felt that something like that could be done here. So nagkaroon nga ang unang-unang pumutok dyan, nagkaroon ng pangalan na Mindanao Independence Movement. So you had here a group of people, a group of, actually they were not ordinary people, they were actually part of the religious hierarchy. These were religious priests and bishops, if we would call it that, mga imam. Sila nagsasabi na this is the land of Islam. And so there were those that also were feeling to be a little bit more radical. So they felt that they could be able to come up with an independence movement and claim Mindanao, Sulu, and Basilan and Tawi-Tawi as the land of Islam. So that was how it began, the independence movement. But because of that, precisely, our armed forces in the beginning were actually overrun because the assistance being given to the independence movement was coming from several countries abroad, especially coming from Libya. That was headed then by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. So he was giving logistical support, he was giving spiritual support, and all the kind of assistance that could be given for the independence movement. Kaya nangyari ito from 1966, nag-erupt yung Mindanao Independence Movement. At the time, this was the incumbency of President Marcos. He tried to quell that kind of a movement by talking to the political leaders. But apparently, there was already a breakaway from between the political leaders and the leaders of the independence movement. They wanted, the peasantry was already part of that movement. Kaya nahirapan si President Marcos to be able to just quell it by talking to the political leaders. And that was when, because of a lot of intelligence reports, it was realized that there was actually a big amount of support coming from countries, Islamic countries, from the Middle East, specifically from Libya. And that was when it was important that how are we going to do this? How are we going to tell Libya to stop supporting an independence movement in southern Philippines? I am trying to trace this kind of a history until we can reach to what has happened now, these bombings and these terrorist activities. So ang mahalaga dito ay maintindihan natin na nung nagsimula ito yung kanilang kinakailangan ipalabas na hihiwalay sila sa Republika. At ang tumutulong sa kanila ay isang bansa at isang leader na kung saan lahat ng merong mga national wars of liberation ay tinutulungan din niya. So this is where, from personal experience, as we've said, we have seen that building in Tripoli, for instance, where Colonel Gaddafi at the time was also supporting the Irish Revolutionary Army, which was, the fight between the Catholics and the Protestants. He was also supporting Idi Amin. He was also supporting other wars of liberation in Angola. Basta meron siyang nabalitaan na merong war of liberation kahit saan man sa mundo, sapagkat napakayaman ng Libya, tinutulungan niya. Ganyan ang nangyari dito sa atin sa Pilipinas. Because we had Nur Miswari, who organized also part of that Mindanao Independence Movement, nag-breakaway doon, nagkaroon na ng MNLF at saka MILF. And then you had this assistant instructor from the University of the Philippines, yan si Nur Miswari. He decided, when martial law was declared, to leave the university and go back to his hometown, at his home province there in Jolo. He was a Tausug. Kaya doon nagkaroon siya ng organization din niya, na kagaya nga ng sinabi ko, MILF, MNLF. At nagkaroon siya ng pagkakataon na sumama sa tinatawag na Islamic Conference. Ito yung mga pagsama-sama ng mga iba't ibang bansa na naniniwala sa relihiyon ng Islam, at nakapasok siya dyan at naimbita siya at doon siya nagsalita. At hindi nga maganda ang kanyang pinagsasabi doon. Ang sabi niya, ang ating daw pamahalaan, ang ating government ay merong tinatawag na genocide against the Muslims in Mindanao. Of course, this disturbed a lot of Islamic countries. Kaya nga nagkaroon ng several of those from the Islamic Conference. They came here, a delegation of 4, and they wanted to observe what was happening. Pero hindi pa yan ang natapos doon. Sapagkat si Colonel Gaddafi, paniwalang-paniwala na pinapatay ng ating pamahalaan ang mga Muslim, which is not true, of course. And that was why it was necessary at the time for President Marcos to find out how we can be able to communicate with Colonel Gaddafi and inform him of exactly what's happening in Mindanao. So there was some kind of there was an invitation extended to the President if he wishes to meet with Colonel Gaddafi. But at the time, marami din tayong problema dito sa Luzon, and the President would not be able to leave the country at that particular stage. And so he sent his First Lady, Imelda Romualdez Marcos. Hindi po ba kayo magtatanong, bakit si Imelda Marcos ang ipadadala ng ating Pangulo? Unang-una, naisip ni President Marcos na walang dalang bagahe si Mrs. Marcos tungkol sa mga iba't ibang mga diplomatic language at lahat ng yan. At alam niya na makakaya nito in a way na kausapin si Colonel Gaddafi bilang isang ina ng bayan, to appeal to a leader that is considered as some kind of a dictator at the time, to appeal to his sense of peace, so that he will understand what is happening here in our country, and that a woman's voice and a woman's manner of addressing the situation to a foreign leader would be accepted in a way, because he would understand how a mother would feel if her people, her children, the Filipinos, are being killed, and that there was no use for a war actually that would be happening. So naisip ni President Marcos na padala si Mrs. Marcos. So we went. We were privileged and honored really to be part of the delegation. It was a big delegation sapagkat pinasama ni President Marcos din yung ating mga general. Andyan yung mga namumuno sa ating armed forces, sa Philippine Army, sa Philippine Constabulary. Si General Ramos yun, siya namumuno dyan. Sa ating Philippine Navy, lahat ng yan. Nagpadala din si President Marcos kasama ni Mrs. Marcos yung mga members ng kabinete. At that time, they were called ministers. So you had the Minister of Finance, Minister of Tourism, Minister of Information, Minister of several others that were Minister of Foreign Affairs also. And all of them were part of that big delegation. Nagpasama rin si President Marcos sa mga kasama sa media. Ngunit hindi pinayagan na pumasok sa Tripoli ang television crew ng ating government. Kaya lahat ng pinapasok lang yung mga manunulat. But we were privileged to be part of that delegation, and so we were able to see how it was in Tripoli, and we witnessed many of the dialogues that transpired between President Marcos and Mrs. Marcos. But what actually happened there in the beginning? So there was nothing we knew very much about Libya. There was very little that we knew about Tripoli, the capital of Libya, and absolutely zero almost of what we knew about Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. The information or the literature or whatever it is that we have read as far as Muammar Gaddafi was concerned was fed to us through the Western media. Kaya ang sinusulat doon na nababasa natin ay, naku, isa siyang diktador. He was able to engage in a coup d'etat against his uncle so that he assumed power. At the time, he was about, ilang taon ba siya noon? He was about 33 years old at the time that President Marcos sent Mrs. Imelda Marcos to meet with him. He was very young and had a very young cabinet. In fact, the members of his cabinet, I think, nobody was even older than he was. So that was the kind of person that we saw and actually met there in Tripoli. But prior to that, there was really almost zero of anything that we knew about Colonel Gaddafi, except that he was fierce, he was a dictator, and that he was, of course, strongly supporting the Mindanao Independence Movement, which broke away with the MILF and the MNLF. In fact, they were housed in that building that I was talking about, where several officers were also there. I already mentioned the IRA, the Angola Liberation Front, Idi Amin, etc. And Miswari and Salamat were also housed in the same building. As I've said earlier, Muammar Gaddafi was supporting any war of liberation anywhere in the world. So it was that when we arrived there, we were met by his lady, his first lady, his wife, who we understood much later was a nurse, actually, who was trained by the Central Intelligence Agency to assassinate Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. But later on, when she admitted to him that she was supposed to do the task, Gaddafi said, "I will marry you." And so that was an insult also to the CIA in a way. So this is a story that we were able to get through the, well, I wouldn't want to say the grapevine, but it was quite a reliable source when we got this story. But anyway, she was there at the airport to meet with Mrs. Marcos. And we were billeted properly, but what happened was we were there for about 4 days or even a little more. And an audience with Colonel Gaddafi has not yet been arranged. No matter how often our delegation or the Foreign Office officials were also meeting with the foreign officials of Colonel Gaddafi to inform the colonel that Mrs. Marcos would like to have an audience with him. So for the past 4 days that we were there, we were given a tour of Tripoli. We were shown several of the ruins of the Carthaginian conquest of the Roman Empire, which was also part of the Northern African Roman Empire. So, and then we also had visits to children's hospitals, museums, and whatever it is. So, what happened was, 4 days, wala pang notice na pwede makipagkita si Mrs. Marcos kay Colonel Gaddafi. So, nangyari dyan, well, you had Secretary of Defense, who was also part of the delegation, Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile, and the head of the Philippine Constabulary, General Fidel Ramos. They both decided to leave Mrs. Marcos in Tripoli, telling her that there is no way that Gaddafi would meet with her or with the delegation, so they might as well go home. And that's exactly what I told President Marcos, that Libya was really diametrically against our initiative to have peace in Mindanao. But Mrs. Marcos told the President, "Marcos, give me at least a little more time. I am sure I will be able to meet with Colonel Gaddafi." So what she did was, nisip niya, and I think I told this story already, kung pupuntahan niya yung nanay ni President Gaddafi, hindi na ba siya sigurado kung yun talaga ang original mother, because she was also thinking, since we knew very little about the history of Colonel Gaddafi or his ancestry, baka maraming asawa yung kanyang ama, and we don't know exactly which of the mothers would be the mother of Colonel Gaddafi. So Mrs. Marcos decided to see the father. And of course, logically, there would only be one father. So we had to go to the desert where the father was. It was quite a distance. He was living in a huge tent in the desert. And that was where Mrs. Marcos said, "You know, I have been trying to meet with your son, but we have been here for a couple of days and he has not received us. And I come with a message of peace," and all of that. So while she was there, we were also treated to a sumptuous lunch of lamb. The way they cook it is so different from the way we cook it. Anyway, so that was it. And before we were, after that, on our way back, we understood from several of the couriers that Colonel Gaddafi was now willing to receive Mrs. Marcos. And that was as soon as we got back to Tripoli, coming from the desert to meet with his father. And the Secretary of State, Dr. Al-Treki, first came in and said that Colonel Gaddafi is now ready to meet with Mrs. Marcos. And so that was the beginning. And that's exactly how it started. So Colonel Gaddafi said that, he actually, I don't know if it's a joke, but it said something like, "Are you not afraid to be kidnapped, Mrs. Marcos?" because what happened prior to that was our aircraft carrier, our Philippine Airlines chartered flight, was diverted from Tripoli to Benghazi. In fact, the Secretary of Tourism, Secretary Aspiras, volunteered even to go to Benghazi to get our plane back to Tripoli, hoping that we could use it on our way back. So anyway, that was the opening line of Colonel Gaddafi to Mrs. Marcos, "Are you not afraid to be kidnapped?" But what happened was Mrs. Marcos replied as expected of her, and she said, "Well, I am willing to give up my life so that we can have peace in Mindanao." And that struck Colonel Gaddafi really quite strongly. And he said, "You speak of peace, Islam is peace." And so he also volunteered and said he will underline all the passages in the Quran which speaks of peace, because he said that is our religion. And that began the conversations between Colonel Gaddafi and Imelda Marcos, and that was where they revolved around the idea of how they can establish peace in Mindanao. So it was the demands were to have an independent state. So Colonel Gaddafi said, now we have to give them a place where they could really be independent. And that is why there was the back and forth writing of what is now known as the Tripoli Agreement, wherein 10 provinces and 5 cities in southern Philippines, respectively Regions 9 and Regions 12, were considered to be the regional autonomous government. Short of independence, that was what was included in the Tripoli Agreement, so that both Muslims and Christians and the natives, or whatever else religion they may be in that particular territory, they would live together under an autonomous government. That was the first time na nagkaroon ng word na autonomous government. And we had, the late Simeon Dato Madong, there was also in that agreement the establishment of the regional parliament, and you also had the regional executive council. And so you had the late Simeon Dato Manong as the head of the executive council, the chairman of the autonomous governments. And then you had Abulcair Alonto, who was the leader also of the rebel movement, and he was made speaker of the assembly for the regional autonomous government. So there you have it. And from 1977, when the Tripoli Agreement was finally signed between the two government representatives of the Republic of the Philippines and the Libyan government, we had peace in Mindanao from 1977 until 1986. When Mrs. Aquino took over, she invited Nur Miswari to the Philippines, and that was the mission given to former Senator Senator Aquilino Pimentel and Butch Aquino, the brother of Ninoy Aquino. They went to fetch Miswari, and so he came in through the back door, and I think Mrs. Aquino also went there to meet him, whatever. We do not understand the reasons behind all of this, but he came in, and then we had the revival again of, he was given a good position, he was given several responsibilities. He was made governor, in fact, of the autonomous government, but there were skirmishes and there were conflicts because, as you've said, there are several tribes that we have in Mindanao that follow the Islam faith. You have the Maguindanao, you have the Maranao. The Maguindanaos are those in the Cotabato area, and then you have the Maranaos, and they are there in the Lanao area. And then you have the Tausug, the Yakan, and all of the other tribes in Sulu, and in Holo, in Tawi-Tawi, and in Basilan. And we have said this before, and we'll say it again. A Maranao would not want to be under a Maguindanaoan. A Maguindanaoan would not want to be under a Maranaoan. And the same goes for the 3 island provinces in the uttermost south of Mindanao. And it goes up to this day. However else you would say that this is not so, it is so. And so what do we have? Then we have skirmishes. There were several factions, etc., and the conflict was revived all over again. But something was happening at this time in the Middle East. You heard about the Arab Spring. You heard about the beginnings in Egypt, where there were already protests against the Muslims themselves, protesting against the Islamic rule of several of their leaders, a political conflict, but there was already divisions, actually. So there were the more radical groups, and there were those who wanted to establish just the status quo. And then this spread to several other countries in the North African region until it got to several other countries in the Middle East and crossing the Mediterranean. And then there was this happening that, in Iran, for instance, where they believed that there could be the establishment of some kind of a caliphate, which was several centuries back when the Islamic civilization practically ruled the whole of Europe, the Middle East, and of course, all the way up to Russia and all the way here in the region of Southeast Asia. That was how Islam was spread at the time, under several caliphates, actually, empires, so to speak. And so there was a revival of this. And there was the radical group that wanted something similar to that. And they invoked several passages of the Quran, which have already been distilled in many of the hadiths that were pronounced by the Prophet Muhammad. And so there came to be the extreme version that if the infidels should actually be exterminated. And so if you kill somebody who does not belong to the Islam faith, you would go directly to the heavens. So that was the belief that they carried on, and that was where that Islamic ISIS was formed, or the Daesh was formed, which you could see, when we saw this, you had several of the beheadings that they undertook to prove that this is the way that we should be able to establish the caliphate that we want. The radical, militant, violent group, and which has already been named as a terrorist organization because of what they have done in several cities of Europe, in several cities in America, in several other places throughout the world, so that they can leave their mark. This is how we are going to do this, so that we can be able to establish this kind of an ISIS. And you see what happened to Syria, where this really was propagated by al-Baghdadi, the head of the ISIS at the time. And there was this big confrontation between the armed forces of Syria with Bashar al-Assad, who's a medical doctor, by the way, fighting this ISIS. And it spread in several other countries throughout the Middle East. And that was the kind of severe kind of terrorism that they wanted to spread. Until, well, al-Baghdadi was killed, and Syria won over the ISIS there, because the Russian armed forces assisted now Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, to overcome one of the biggest commercial cities in Syria, which is in Aleppo. You will recall this if you will remember how this is being broadcast at the time. Aleppo was held for how long? For 6 years of this Syrian war against the ISIS. And finally, after the Russians decided to assist the armed forces of Bashar al-Assad, well, they were removed from the commercial industrial city of the Aleppo, and that was overcome by the armed forces of Syria itself. So there was a kind of a lull as far as the ISIS are concerned. And with the death of al-Baghdadi, the head of the ISIS, they decided to move their territory all over the world. And that was the command exactly of what he said. Wherever you are the ISIS, wherever you are able to establish or have a foothold, then establish the ISIS and the caliphate. And so it happened that first they tried this here in some towns in Maguindanao, and then they decided to enter Marawi city. But it took them not immediately. This was a process, about a year or so, or even more, when they started to infiltrate many of the families, because you know how it is in our place, we are all interrelated, everybody is a relative. And so they were able to infiltrate families, and especially those in the middle class, because they had the money, and they also were able to establish support coming from the ISIS overseas. And that's why you had all of these foreigners also who came in to assist the creation of bombs and all of this there in the city of Marawi. So the explosion that happened, the bombing that happened in Marawi at the time, was not, a spur of the moment thing, because already our army intelligence knew that the ISIS were already located there. And in fact, one of the heads of those terrorists, who was part of the group that was training many of our Muslim brothers on how to produce bombs and all of these incendiaries, he was already there, and there is a warrant of arrest for him. And so what happened was an ordinary day, supposedly an ordinary day, that the policeman would go to Marawi City to present the warrant of arrest to this wanted criminal, of course an IC member, but a criminal nonetheless, and to arrest him. What happened was they were confronted by a phalanx of tall men in black uniforms and heavy arms, and that began the siege of Marawi. So that was when we saw all the bombings, etc., and that lasted for about 6 months actually. The fighting that was happening there, you see what the damage and the destruction done to the city of Marawi. So there we have it. After 6 months, the ISIS group was overcome. They were arrested. They were killed, as a matter of fact. Although they say that some were able to escape, but they would have difficulty establishing again another kind of a movement, because they will have to look for a place which would be sympathetic to them. But what happened in Marawi, we saw that the people knew what was happening. In fact, several accounts were saying that they were already warned early on, even before the policeman came with a warrant of arrest, that there would be some kind of a confrontation. There was already a massive evacuation that was happening even before the actual battle was going to start. But that's already part of our history. But what I'm trying to say is, after Marawi City, they tried to come up with little snippets of where they could explode, they could bomb, they could make their presence felt. But that was no longer possible until we saw what happened now in Jolo just this year. January, we had the bombing near the cathedral, in the cathedral, as a matter of fact, a Catholic cathedral. And then just recently, a week ago, we had the bombing there, where you had several soldiers, 7 of them, I understand, were killed, several civilians, and a number of people that were injured, again claimed by the ISIS. So what is this that I'm trying to trace? Well, you have all of these breakaway terrorist groups coming from an original group that wanted to radicalize the independence movement into a rebel movement for an autonomous government, which was already granted to them, as a matter of fact, a law. 2 laws, as a matter of fact. One, which was already included in our constitution during the time of Mrs. Aquino, for the autonomous government in Muslim Mindanao. And then again, another law which passed during the time of Noynoy Aquino, where you had now the BARM, and now you have this establishment under President Duterte, where he has met actually with Nur Miswari and several of the members of the MNLF and MILF, and said, okay, this is the law, look over it, find out what else you can add to this, and that was it. And so now we have the autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao. In effect, they have the legislature, which is their parliament, and they have the mechanisms of a federal form of government. But there are still these spurts of rebellion, not rebellion, but the spurts of these militant groups erupting every once in a while. And 2 of the biggest ones that actually erupted, well, several others also happened even while we already had this, they call it the Bangsamoro Regional Autonomous, the BARM. Even during the time that they were already effective, you still had skirmishes and you still had all of these violent confrontations. One of the most recent one was the one in Jolo, and that was where our President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, went yesterday. And always, every time he goes to Jolo, he kisses the ground. Again, in recognition of the fact that that was where Islam came in initially, or the first landing of the Sharif in Jolo for the establishment of the Islam faith in our country. Be that as an act of respect, an act of honor for the entrance of Islam several centuries ago, an act of respect for the place, and also perhaps an act of acknowledging and honoring those who have died because of this violent activity. I am trying to connect all of this so that you could see the movement of all of these activities that have caused violence, disturbing the lives of ordinary people, and of course the lives of our Muslim brothers, because then always, like what's happening in several of the territories where they are located, they're often the accusation that maybe they're coming from there, maybe they're there, etc. So again, the bias and the prejudice arises precisely because of activities like this. How can this be stopped? Oh my goodness. It took 6 years for Syria and the president of Syria, together with the Russian armed forces, to overcome Aleppo and the rest of Syria that was controlled by the ISIS. It took them 6 years to be able to overcome the ISIS and to finally kill the leader of the ISIS. It took us 6 months to remove the ISIS in Marawi city. But now we see skirmishes again erupting. How long will it take? Do we have a timeline for this? Or why is this still happening? Perhaps now is the time not to review, but to have answers to the questions of if what was given already for the religion of Islam to be able to propagate itself, because Islam is a way of life in several territories in southern Philippines, including Christian territories. These are some barangays that were also included in the autonomous government. So with all of this, why are there still some of those believing in some extreme action to do what? To create havoc, to kill, to fight our military when there was already peace. So, do we have the answers to this? As I've said, it is difficult sometimes to really search for them. I think Rainer Maria Rilke said this at one time. Do not start searching and struggling to find the answers, because they will not be given to you. But let the time proceed as you ask the question, because somewhere as you're asking this, it is already being answered without your being aware of it. So, I throw this back now by asking, why are we still having all of these skirmishes? Why is the ISIS still operating? Why are all of these extreme acts of violence being undertaken? Terrorism in its ugliest and most horrendous form, of simply killing people for no reason at all. There was at least a cause that they had in the beginning, to secede, to be independent, to have autonomy. Now we do not see, except the original idea of establishing what? A caliphate? Of establishing a territory, of marking the ground as saying, this is how we're going to perform. The performance of killing. Because even our Muslim brothers condemn this act. And it's really quite strange that even our Commission on Human Rights has not even condemned it, or even made a statement strong enough to say that this cannot happen anymore. And who are these people creating this kind of terrorism in the midst of Jolo, such a beautiful place? The 3 islands in southern Philippines, in Mindanao, are 3 of the most beautiful places in our country. If ever really there would be a chance to go there without the fear of being caught in whatever violent activity they may be erupting, you should really go and visit, because then you could begin to understand that in the midst of this paradisical, it's almost like close to heaven when you look at the vast open space of the ocean, the celibacy, and the foliage and all of this. It is so beautiful and looking so calm that you cannot understand why there could still be a group of people who would want to create havoc and killing and destruction and death. And so this brings us back now to many things that we celebrated recently about revolutions and about several rebellions and so forth. And we go back to the first Philippine Revolution of 1896 and how that did not really materialize. Short-lived, 2 years, because of betrayal. Betrayals of those who were aspiring to be head, to be able to be the Supremo or the Supreme Commander or the President. Betrayals of those friends, actually. Because where is betrayal coming from except from the people around you? You do not get betrayed by your enemy. You get betrayed by the people close to you. And so that is what happens too at this particular stage in our lives. And so you look at Jolo and the bombings that happened there. You watch our president kissing the ground, acknowledging the honor to be given to the soldiers. One of them even shouted, "Hahabulin ko po yung suicide bomber," when he himself was also part of the explosion as he tried to run after the suicide bomber. And so you could see that all of this brings out, the valor of all of the men in uniform and those who try to protect and save our republic from acts like this. You have a terrorism law which is now being disputed and questioned in the Supreme Court for reasons which we will perhaps understand as soon as the Supreme Court makes a decision regarding this. But it is an anti-terror law precisely, And it is terrorism that actually now colors with blood many of our places in southern Philippines, and also even here in the metropolis whenever we have acts of terrorism. And so it goes that we join our hands again in prayer. And we look at the time in the past when it was possible to have peace in those areas where people wanted to be independent. It took an Imelda Romualdez Marcos to talk to a leader, a dictator, so to speak, like Muammar Gaddafi, to be able to establish peace in Mindanao from 1977 with the Tripoli Agreement until 1986, when all of this erupted again and gave birth to many children and grandchildren of terrorist activities. So why do we go back to this? Because there is still the hope that if the Tripoli Agreement could have been implemented properly, correctly, and the way it should have been with the leaders there, we would have had peace all throughout. I go back in time and I have to acknowledge what was done during that time, because many times and over the past 35 years, nobody has even spoken of what was done at that time that peace was established in southern Philippines with 2 autonomous regions of 10 provinces and 5 cities, living together with all religions, all tribes, all cultures, all colors, without any conflict between and among themselves. It was done then for so many years, and it was never revived again, nor was it given any continuity at all. I speak of this because, as I've said, up close, professionally and personally, I have seen that happening at that time, and it was able, and during that period, our government was able to establish peace. Let us hope then that with all the efforts being undertaken by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, there could still be a going back and forth of all of this and trying to trace the history of what has happened then, and it still can be done. There is nothing impossible, they say, under the heavens. There is only a time and season for every activity. So there it is that we join our hands in prayer. First, of course, for the pandemic that I have spoken of, this COVID-19. And secondly, for the establishment of peace, not only in southern Philippines, but throughout our country. Especially now that we are confined to quarters, confined to the sanctuaries of our homes. Let us consider now that sanctuary, our homes, ourselves, within our hearts, that particular threshold of peace, so that we can live together in commonality, despite all the diversity that may color our beliefs, our religions, our political inclinations. All of this could be submerged and sublimated to one peaceful act of humanity, which is to be able to live together as really a family of all people. Thank you very much for having joined me. This has been your Rita Gadi.
Ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.